and form a union. States that coordinate their affairs and form a union, and whatever decision is made by the central government abides by all its members. So today we'll be teaching presidential system and parliamentary system. Yes, presidential system and parliamentary system. So does anybody have any idea what presidential system entails? Anybody? Presidential system, anybody that wants to give us, that has an idea of what? All right, because of time, presidential system is a system of government in which the head of state is also the head of government. That is, powers, especially executive powers, are vested in one person, and the person is referred to as the president. Now, if we look at Nigeria, we have a president, President Muhammadu Buhari. That's to verify that we have a presidential system of government. That is, he controls executive power. He controls executive powers. He appoints his own ministers and other people that fill specialized departments or agencies of government. Now, presidential system of government is also a system of government in which the constitution is supreme, just like we have it in the federal government. Here also the constitution is supreme. The constitution has the final say. Now, also the president is also referred to as GCFR. Now, if you are conversant with, maybe you listen to news or watch news, you will observe that anytime the name of the president has been written, there's always this acronym GCFR, which means Grand Commander of the Republic of Nigeria. That is, he controls the military. He has both executive powers, military power. He's the number one individual, the first individual in a country. Now, what are the functions of the president? What are the functions of the president? Now, the first function of the president is to coordinate the affairs of the entire nation. So irrespective of the number of states that are located in a country, it is the responsibility of the president. However, at the state level, the executive power is vested on the governors, but the governors also is also still under the control, is still under the supervision of the president. Then, apart from that, the president also appoints officials that help in his in the administration. Hello, can you mute your mic? Hello.
Dagbayong, please mute your mic.
So also the president has assent. Now, let's go back to the arms of government. Arms of government, the legislature makes the law, the executive executes or implements the law, while the judiciary adjudicates the law. So before a law is being made, it is firstly a bill. Now, what makes a bill a law is because of the presidential assent. So the presidential assent means the signature of the president that makes a proposed state law. So the president gives assent and entry in Nigeria, for instance, is a member of the United Nations. Now, if there's a meeting, General Assembly meeting, I believe we know that every citizen of Nigeria cannot participate in that meeting. So the president can go and represent us, or he can select some people as representative. Remember, he also has the power to appoint ambassadors. Those ambassadors are there not representing themselves, but they are representing their country. And also, the president also has ceremonial functions. Yes, it's not just executive functions, it's the ceremonial functions okay, every 15th of January in Nigeria is usually celebrated as Armed Forces Remembrance Day. So the president is expected to be there to pay homage to our fallen heroes. So ceremonial functions, there are times whereby the president has to commission some projects in the country and in some states. Then also, he appoints advisors. The president, as the head of state, should have advisors. So we can have special advisor to the president on media affairs, special advisor to the president on education, special advisor to the government on media, special duties, and so many more. So he appoints ambassadors. Then another function of the president is that the president has the power to declare a state of emergency. Now, what is a state of emergency? A state of emergency is a situation where there's restriction of movement. Now, there's restriction of movement, there's restriction of exercise of human rights. What do I mean? Now, for example, if there's a crisis in a country, the president has the power to declare a state of emergency. So at that point, curfew can be imposed in the sense that you will only be allowed to go out from a particular time to a particular time. And another function of the president is that the president has what we call prerogative mercy. That is, this is the constitutional power of a president to grant pardon to convicted personnel, those that have been probably imprisoned or those that have committed any offenses, but they've proved beyond doubt to have had a change of character while in prison. So the president has prerogative power. So he can grant freedom to some selected prisoners. Now, let's move on to characteristics of a presidential system of government. Characteristics of a presidential system of government. The first one is that the head of state is also the head of government. So we have two functions vested in one person. Then the president is expected to perform ceremonial function and executive function. Now, in a presidential system of government, there's also what we call election. There must be periodic election. So in Nigeria, the tenure of office or the term of office for the president is 4 years. So after every 4 years, an election is usually conducted throughout the country. So it is conducted across the states in the country for the purpose of determining who the next president is going to be. And apart from election being conducted, such a person, the president is elected for a fixed term in office based on the constitution of that country. There are some countries where the president is elected for 5 years, some for 4 years, and some for 3 years. Now, another important feature of presidential system of government is individual responsibility. So every of the presidential appointees are individually responsible to him. That is that, for example, if an individual is selected as a minister of education, he is responsible to the president. So is responsible to his boss. Let me say that in quote. So there's individual responsibility. So if such an appointee fails to carry out his or her duty, the president can deem it fit to remove the person or probably allocate another duty to that individual. And also there is separation of power. There's separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Another thing is that in a presidential system of government, there is impeachment clause. That is, the president can be impeached, the president can be removed from office. But before this can take place, there must be two-third majority votes from the legislative house. And then in a presidential system of government, opposition is allowed. Most times, in a presidential system of government, we have multi-party system. This is to ensure that people participate well. they watch the activity, they serve as a watchdog for the elected party or the elected candidate. So opposition is allowed, you are allowed to criticize the government in an orderly way. Then the constitution is also supreme in a presidential system. Now, what are the advantages that comes with presidential system? One, it reduces dictatorship due to the fact that there's always periodic election. So periodic election is usually conducted, and whoever emerges the whoever must emerge as the winner of a presidential election must have the highest number of votes in most cases. This is to show that majority rules. And apart from that, the another function of advantage of presidential system is that there's checks and balances. The checks and balances, there's no abuse of power. Like I said, the president has the power to remove any appointee that is not functioning well. The president has the power to check the excesses of any of these appointees. And the fact that they are also individually responsible to the government, they always ensure that they carry out their duties. They don't jeopardize or try to interfere in the affairs of other political appointees. And then again, it is democratic in nature. It is democratic in the sense that the president is elected based on majority votes. And then the constitution is supreme. The constitution is supreme. That means that the principle of rule of law is implemented. There is equality, there is impartiality, and then the citizens tend to enjoy their fundamental human rights under the presidential system of government. However, whatever that has advantages must also have disadvantages. The disadvantages of presidential system of government, one is red tapeism. Red tapeism in the sense that most times there's always delay in decision making due to duplication of functions. There are political appointees appointed by the government, by the president. These political appointees also might also appoint some people to ease the operation of their administration. So there's always delay when it comes to decision making. And in addition, presidential system is costly to run. It's costly to run also as a result of duplication of function. You can have special advisor to the president on different issues, and these are offices that also costs the government generally in running them. Then we also have no security of tenure for the ministers. The ministers can be impeached Minister of Agriculture based on the discretion of the president. And then the impeachment process also can be very difficult. The impeachment process, it involves a lot of steps. Just like I said, that it involves two-thirds. But before a two-third majority can be arrived, before the legislature can arrive at a two-third majority vote to impeach the president, it might take a long while. Now, another thing we should know is veto power, VETO, veto power. Now, the president has veto power. Some people refer to this veto power as absolute power of the president. So this can lead to misuse or abuse of power. Now, for instance, if the legislature makes a bill to for it to become a law. Now, remember I said presidential assent is needed for a bill to become a law. The president can decide not to sign this bill as a result of veto power. There are instances where the president overrides or ignore the recommendations from the legislature because the president has veto power. So how do we check on a president in a presidential system of government? We have the judicial review. So most time when there is a dispute between the legislature and the executive president, the judiciary comes in to resolve these differences. Then impeachment also, if you see that a president is abusing power, arbitrary use of power, the president can still be impeached. If there is a two-third majority, the president can be removed from office. And then another thing is approval of appointment. Now, when the president comes up with his own cabinet, they are adequately screened by the members of the legislative house. So they go through screening. Now, the legislative house can make recommendations to the president, but the candidates, the appointees that before they are selected or appointed, they are usually screened by the legislature. Then also in the presidential system, there's supremacy of the constitution. So whatever the law say is final. The president does not have the power to override any part of the constitution. Then because of my time, let me move on to the checks on the executive powers, the executive powers in the presidential system of government. There are two forms here. We have the legislative forms and the judicial forms. Now, the legislative forms involves the president has to present annual budget. Annual budget simply has to do with the proposed plan, proposed payment or expenditure spending plan of a country for a fiscal year. This is usually done at the beginning of the year. So it must be approved by the National Assembly in case of Nigeria. Yeah. Then we also have passage of bill. Passage of bill in the sense that if there's a majority in the House that approve a bill, even if the president doesn't, even if the bill is from the president, if majority of the legislative house are against it, the president's bill will be difficult to process. Then another way of checking the power of the president, executive power of the president, is that approval of major appointments. Approval of major appointments. For example, in the presidential system, in the president's cabinet, there are some critical and crucial appointments that must be adequately screened by the legislative members and must be approved before these people are sworn into office. So let me move on to, you can further read on the control of the exercise of power of the presidential system. But let me move on to parliamentary system of government. Parliamentary system of government is also known as cabinet, system of government. Although it's no longer as popular as other forms of government, but parliamentary system of government has existed for a while, even though it's not so commonly practiced in the present world. Now, parliamentary system of government is a system of government in which the head of state is distinct from the head of government. The head of state is not the head of government. So we have two functions vested in two different bodies. The head of state. Now, the head of state is expected to perform ceremonial function, while the head of government performs executive function. So these two functions are vested in two different people. Interest functions are vested in one body. So can you let me start with head of state. The head of state, like I said earlier, is usually the prime is usually the queen, the monarch, and depending on the form of monarchical system that is going on. So it could be a king if it's a man, or a queen if it is a woman. So the person is expected to carry out ceremonial functions like parade, commissioning of projects, and so on. Now, the head of government is usually referred to as the prime minister. This is practiced in Britain. Britain still uses this parliamentary or cabinet system of government till date. The queen, the queen was the queen then. Now we have a king. King Charles is the monarch that performs sorry is the monarch that performs the functions of the head of state, and we have the prime minister. So Nigeria also in 1963 to 1966, we had a parliamentary system of government. We had the queen as the head of government, and we also had a prime minister. We had a president, a prime minister, Alhaji Tafawa Balewa, also functioning as the prime minister. Then what are the features, what are the characteristics of the parliamentary system? The head of state, the head of government is the prime minister. The head of government carries out executive functions, appointment of political employee, signing of bills into law, presentation of budgets, and so on like that. Then another feature is, unlike in a presidential system, in a parliamentary system, there is what we call unpopular election. Unpopular election in the sense that the prime minister is not appointed through election. The prime minister is mostly appointed by the king or the queen if his party wins the majority in the parliament. So this, remember, in a presidential system, most times general elections are conducted throughout the state, but in a parliamentary system, to appoint the prime minister's party must have won a majority in the parliament, that is in the cabinet. Then he or she is then appointed by the head of state, which is the monarch. Then we also have fusion of power. Fusion of power. So that means that there is collective responsibility. The prime minister, his own appointed ministers, they all work together. So there's collectivism. They don't work independently. There's no individual responsibility like we have it in the presidential system of government. Then there is the existence of opposition party. Remember, if there's a majority party, there will also be minority party or parties, as the case may be. So the minority or the opposition parties are also recognized in a parliamentary system of government. Now, another important feature is a vote of no confidence. A vote of no confidence can be passed on to the prime minister to remove the prime minister from office. To remove the prime minister from office, and this is done by the legislature. So the member of the executive, the prime minister, can be removed by a vote of no confidence. While in a presidential system, the president can be removed by impeachment. Then we also have cabinet meetings. Cabinet meetings are usually held, and it is presided over by the prime minister. The prime minister also can also dismiss any minister from his cabinet. So he can decide rather to remove any minister of his or her choice. Then the parliament is supreme. The parliament is supreme, and it's most times parliamentary system is usually bicameral. That is, there are usually two legislative houses in a bicameral legislature. Now, what are the merits of bicameral? Sorry, what are the merits of parliamentary system? Parliamentary system, collective responsibility. So joint decisions are taken. The prime minister most times doesn't take decision alone. He makes decision in collaboration with its other ministers. So there's efficiency. There's efficiency when they deliberate and make decisions regarding the country. Then there's usually mutual understanding between the legislature and the executive. Then there's opposition party also, like I said, that opposition party are recognized. There's opposition party that serves as watchdog. That is, they watch out for the excesses of the executive, the appointed executive. Due to the fusion of power, due to the fusion of power in the parliament, due to the fusion of power, the conflicts are usually eliminated. Yes, conflicts are inevitable, but in contrast to presidential system of government, conflicts in a parliamentary system are minimal. Then obedience to party directive. The ruling party in government, they obey party directives. That is, they don't sideline their political party since they got into power due to the majority of their party in the legislative, in the cabinet. Then we have the merits of parliamentary system of government. Removal of the executive. The prime minister, the executive can be removed by a vote of no confidence. A vote of no confidence is conducted in the cabinet, and once there's a two-third, the prime minister can easily be removed. Then there's the restriction of ministerial appointee. The the prime minister most times tend to appoint his ministers from his own party alone, thereby sidelining members of other political party. Then they are not popularly elected because the prime minister, the choice of the head of state might not reflect the choice of the masses. So there's no popular selection of the prime minister. It is weak in the sense that there is no clear majority winner of any ruling party. Since there's no general election, it is always hard to determine the choice of the people. So in a parliamentary system of government, the belief of the majority rule is absent. So which leads to weak governments. Now, what are the powers and functions of of the prime minister? The president has his power. The prime minister also has his power. The prime minister functions as the head of government and is the chief executive. Also controls the affairs of he also controls the affairs of the country. He carries out administrative purposes. There are times whereby if there's a need to represent the country in international organization, international gatherings, the prime minister is also there to serve as representative of his country. He's also the leader of his party. He's also the leader of the majority party in the cabinet. Then ministerial appointments. The prime minister appoints his ministers from his own political party only, from his own political party, and the prime minister also supervises other departments. Now, what are the differences between a presidential system of government and a cabinet or parliamentary system of government? The first difference you should notice, the first when we started with presidential, we said the function of head of state and head of government is embedded in one person, while in a parliamentary it is separated, it is distinct. So we have two people carrying out the function of ceremonial function and the other carrying out executive function. Now, in a presidential system of government, the president is elected through popular election, majority rules. But in a parliamentary system of government, the leader of the party in an election is usually appointed. The leader of a party in an election is usually appointed. So there is no popular representation of the people. It is based on majority party, not majority rule of the people. Then there is separation of power that is more evident in a presidential system of government. But because of the fusion of power in a parliamentary system, the separation of power is not is not so visible. Then in the presidential system of government, we have individual responsibility. So each of the political appointees, they function differently and they carry out their functions independently and they respond back to the president. But in a parliamentary system of government, collective responsibility, that is, the ministers work together with the prime minister in carrying out their activities. Then, in a presidential system of government, the president and his ministers, they are under the executive arm of government. So they are not part of the legislature, unlike the parliamentary system where the prime minister and his ministers are part of the cabinet. Then the supremacy of the constitution is also evident in a presidential system of parliament, that is the cabinet, is supreme. The decision made in the parliament is supreme, but the constitution is more supreme in a presidential system of government. Then there is effective checks and balances to ensure that there is no arbitrary abuse of power. Powers are one arm of government doesn't try to supersede or excessively intervene in the affairs of another. So there's adequate checks and balances in a parliamentary system, but in a presidential system, but in a parliamentary system, powers are fused together. Powers are fused together. So in most cases, since the prime minister and the prime minister and his ministers, they are also executive, they're also part of the parliament. So it's hard to separate this from each other. Then the president is elected for a fixed term in office, while in a parliamentary system, it is flexible. The prime minister can, despite being the leader of his party in the parliament, can be replaced, can be removed. So countries that practice presidential system, we have USA, we also have our country, Nigeria, while parliamentary system is mostly practiced in Britain. So I'm going to end today's class there. Any question? Any question or clarification? Any question?
No, ma'am.
Anybody with a question? Can you hear me? Okay. So can I ask question? Can I ask question? Who can tell me three characteristics of a presidential system of government? Three characteristics of a presidential system of government.
They appoint ambassadors and they coordinate the country.
They what? I didn't get that correctly.
They
Yeah. Okay. I guess network is not allowing me to hear Kudirat Oluwatobiloba. So a quick recap is that presidential system, the head of state is the same as the head of government. There is collective responsibility. There is separation of power. The president is popularly elected for a fixed term in office, and it is practiced in countries such as USA, Nigeria, while a parliamentary system, the head of state is distinct from the head of government. The prime minister is usually the leader of the cabinet or the parliament, and there's collective responsibility and fusion of power. So checks and balances is usually difficult in a parliamentary system. So that's the end of the class today. So please, next week, read ahead. You can start with monarchical system of government. We'll start with monarchy next week. So any other question any other question? All right, I hand it here. Thank you for listening.
thank you, ma'am.
Um,